Hi, my name's Rebecca Ibel. I'm here at Contemporary Art Matters in Columbus, Ohio. Our exhibition Sculpture One is open. It's on view through April 15th. And I am sitting in front of the works by Almond Zigmund. And I am talking with Almond Zigmund, my friend and artist. And we've been friends and collaborators and working together since we met when she was a student of Dave Hickey's at UNLV. So it goes back a few years. Our daughters are close in age, and we have always had mutual interests. And so I'm delighted to work with you again here and have these beautiful sculptures.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here as well. And we have had a really long relationship. I'm so grateful for it because there are few people throughout my career that I can say that I've had that connection with.
Yes, well, we need each other. And, I love your work. I wouldn't be able to fake a friendship if I didn't like your work too. That would be really hard. But I love your work. And I was thinking this morning about how I wanted to approach these pieces in the gallery. But I thought, thinking back on some of the first works that I saw from your days at UNLV, there was sort of this connection with design always. Now, over the years, I know you've done larger installations and pieces at Desert X that are outside, but there's something very compelling to me about your smaller scale work, the way it's sculpture that you live with. It always is beautiful but intriguing, and there's a combination of sort of an intellectual modernist approach to a craft maker approach. How do you think about the way you approach work?
I love that description. When thinking about the pieces that you have behind you and then trajectory that I took to get there, a lot of it really does relate back to the body and how the body lives with art and how the body inhabits a space and the relationship of the body to works of art. And so I've kind of gone back and forth with, with the larger installations that you were talking about. Really, I saw them as tableaus in which to have an experience, a visceral experience with your body to an environment. And design and architecture have always been, not only are they created for bodies, but they are used to influence bodies, to influence experiences. And so in thinking about that and in thinking about that sort of that relationship, I kind of started thinking about how to make something that was more representative of the body in that space and the relationship. I kind of wanted to take, what I was seeing as that relationship between the body and space and object and create pieces that were sort of discrete and spoke of those things, spoke of the gestures. And it's a really simple idea.
It is here, and we sort of jumped ahead and didn't even describe. So these sculptures behind me are outlines, as I understand, of classic sculptural poses.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the one all the way on the left is sort of a seated pose. And none of the sculptures that I chose were sort of famous. As you're walking through, the sculpture halls at Met, there's tons of either plaster or carved marble. Then there's like a contrapposto. One of the things that I loved about, doing these pieces was, and because when you kind of just create the outline of them, that you're sort of subject to whether or not they're going to balance. And they all balanced, which was kind of amazing. It's not surprising necessarily, but kind of enforces the sort of, mathematical harmonies that accompanied the visual.
I think that's why I like them so much. They tease my art history background, and having one of the things we share is we both studied in Paris, and I just will always have those images of being in the Louvre and wandering through and that classical education, what those sculptural forms and those, the proportions. I love the way you've merged that with a modernism. And
Yeah.
there is a real harmony and balance to that.
And I think that there is a connection that goes, globally, really, because you see them in classical forms and classical, that's the sort of foundation for Western. But, when you look in Egyptian forms, when you look in African forms, Asian forms, the shapes, they don't change because there are bodies. We all have bodies. They're all, that's the reference point that comes back to. And I love looking across these historical traditions, art traditions and design traditions, just to see the commonality that runs, the threads that run through them. And, I started with these, and it was sort of this desire to kind of go back to a basic foundational, like, what do you do in art school? You draw the figure, and oftentimes you draw reproduction, or you draw from reproductions, plaster cast. So it was a task that I gave myself, kind of to start drawing again. So I see these as a sort of going back to the locating the figure in the spaces that I have created in the past, and sort of trying to draw from those experiences of, environments for figures to exist in, to creating discrete pieces that sort of stand in for our own bodies.
The last series of sculptures that we showed in the gallery many years ago were like boxes of wood piled on top of each other that almost made sort of human forms, if you will, or, in different ways, abstract ways. But here you've really sort of hollowed them out and simplified them even further. Is that something you think about sort of taking away or reducing?
Always. Although with those first pieces that you're talking about, I think I wasn't as clear in my intention of making a figurative piece. I think that I was really making a sculptural piece. I wanted to make an object. And even though I often think about gesture and movement and form, I think with these pieces, I was being very specific about the body reference. And in those pieces, they were, in retrospect, I think, yes, they were figurative, and they were stand-ins for the body as well, kind of creating an environment. But I wasn't being as intentional. Those were still sort of outside of me, because I'm always the stand-in, right? Like, if, what is my experience? What am I seeing in the world? How am I relating to my environment? For those, I was kind of creating another figure for me to relate to.
One of the other artists in the exhibition is Bianca Beck. And the piece we have is from a body of work called Body Double. And her background in dance and exploring the figures as they move together and their organic forms, and just knowing you just a little. Ballet may not be where you, or modern dance, but I know you do a lot of yoga. And I was just thinking of these yoga poses, which are really more like still and concentrated and, angular and less sort of Martha Graham, right?
Right. I do think about dance a lot, and that is in my very sort of young formative. I mean, my dad is a jazz musician, and my mom was a modern dancer. So there are definitely those kind of relational situations, with jazz being a kind of improvisational on top of a structure, modern dance being formal relationships of bodies in motion, those two sort of fundamental kind of ways of approaching a system of making has been, I think foundational for me, for sure. And I've thought about it a lot, like why I came to understand what I do in the language of design and color. And, I kind of took from those, that world, design, architecture, color is a pretty important thing for me.
Yes.
And overlaid them with this other sort of foundational, understanding language. That's kind of where I feel like I'm coming from in terms of these. And there's certainly an evolution, and I kind of feel like I continue, to better understand the relationship of the body to work.
To go back to Dave Hickey a little bit, the grand character and mentor, there definitely was kind of a school of students at UNLV, and there are sort of cross principles of modernism that came out of that. How was that experience for you?
Also foundational. I mean, it's interesting to kind of layer all of these things on top of each other. Came from New York, sort of seeking that without realizing that I was looking for it at the time. I think wanting a freedom to indulge in things that at the time in New York didn't feel like I could. And that really was design heavy, influences. It's really something that I'm still sort of reckoning with, like what being in Las Vegas at that time for me was about. And I do feel like when I got there, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And I was able to exhale and just to do what I wanted to do. And the very first thing I did was an installation in the 7-Eleven that was right next door to our studio. Our studios were in strip malls. And there was a 7-Eleven right next door, which I went to every day. And I was really into Marc Auger and this idea of these everyday places that we pass through. There are these everyday places like airports and convenience stores that are a really big part of our life, but they really have no anchoring features. And so I decided that I wanted to do an installation in the 7-Eleven to kind of create a sense of place there. I extracted designs from William Morris wallpaper and created these soft sculptures that I put up on the refrigerators and put up on the facades of the 7-Eleven. So it was kind of this exploration of how design is used to create community, environment. I've actually begun lately to realize that really the thing that I want my work to do is to bring joy. And that's actually something that I think that everybody in Las Vegas was actually very attuned to. This desire to create beauty.
What I also am just thinking about too is you live in East Hampton, and there's a grand tradition of artists living out in Long Island as well. And sometimes I think some of the abstract women artists have a different take on this kind of modernism that is more about joy and pleasure. And I was thinking of Mary Heilman. Isn't she out there somewhere?
Yes,
Got a neighbor?
yeah, I love Mary. Mary's the epitome of cool.
I see some parallels in your work and in your drawings, the collages, and the objects she makes, and this non-caring about definitions of what is sculpture or fine art versus tables and chairs and objects, and living and bringing joy into your environment.
Yeah, I also Pagel did a Zoom with Jim Iserman last week that I sat in on. It was for his Claremont class, like his Claremont graduate class, and I feel that way about Jim's work as well. It's just an unabashed embrace and celebration of design, not only design, but sort of reproduction, like that's something that I think about a lot and is important to me. The idea that everybody can live with it, that everybody, can access beauty on some level. If I can sort of describe Vegas, to get back to that in one, like the importance of that for me, it is the support of embracing the idea of beauty within the context of art and promoting it, as a radical idea as well, not as an elitist, or that it is a populist idea. Beauty is completely for everybody. I like to take the notion that art is an elite occupation, and both as a practitioner as well as a consumer, out of the equation.
That's a long-standing issue, but one of the things I learned from Dave Hickey is that you don't, as an art maker, as an artist, have to be a tortured soul to do it. You can be healthy and explore beauty and joy, as well as express challenges and reflect on social issues. I think some of the great things about classical art, Greek and Roman, is that it does reflect on certain concepts of balance and harmony, and that is both social and political. I have been living with your work as well for many years, and I love it. And I love that you are responding to different environments, not only from the desert in California, but also to like parking garages.
Whenever anybody's got like a funny, weird space, they're like, call Almond. She'll do something.
Sarah Kane is a little bit like that. She's also done installations in parking garages. And there is a group of sort of women abstract painters and sculptors who have their own breed of art making and rule breaking and, you know, changing definitions of what makes up of an object or work of art. I hope this video will help people come and see the exhibition in real life. The objects are much cooler in person. And
Yes.
I love using this, you know, the Zoom time to share our experiences with a bigger audience. So thank you for talking with me today.
Yes, thank
And,
you for having me. Can you see over my shoulder? There is a painting of the collage that you have over your shoulder.
oh, it is. It
I've been
is.
doing, I've been doing a lot with reproduction lately and painting the collages.
I
Um,
love that. Thank you for talking with me today, and come and see the show. It's on view through April 15th. Thanks, Almond.